So awkward. just adding the awkward element to our day. Okay, breakout rooms returning in just a few moments here. Trying to wrap up those good conversations. It's always a surprise when it's like, oh, conversation over. Welcome back. Welcome back. Yeah. Yeah, see everyone in one view. Well, thank you for returning and welcome back. Hi to some new faces that have hopped in since this morning. Good to see you again. Would just like to take this moment to say thank you all for being here and helping us run such wonderful programs like Sunday Morning Zen. If you're so able, please take a look in your chat box. There is a link to donate. We would be so grateful to have you share your generosity with us that we can put to programs like this. So our Dharma talk is upon us, and I am very pleased to introduce a woman who needs no introductions here at our Zen Center, Ms. Christine DuSell. She's a longtime practitioner and a member of our center who has contributed so graciously and so generously in so many ways, from mindfulness instruction to board assistance and kinship circle steward, and just a overall wonderful person to be around. I'm very excited to have her speak this morning, and her Dharma talk is entitled The Practice of Compassion.
Thank you, Kelly. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. So the practice of compassion. When a little more than a week ago when I sat down, I had sent Kathy and Kelly the title to my talk, which I had just come up with, just sort of decided what I was going to speak on. So I just sent it off to them. And then like a day or two later, I sat down and I was like, what the heck was I thinking? I mean, it's like, could I find something bigger to talk about? You know, it's just a huge topic. So there was a part of me that was saying, what a fool you are. Like, how are you ever going to capture something in a 30, 40-minute talk? And then there was another part of me that I decided to listen to, which said, anything you say on compassion is going to be useful and valuable. So don't worry about it. So that's a little bit about what happens to me when I agree to do a talk on Sunday Morning Zen is, you know, first you got to find the topic, and then you think you feel really good about it, and then the moment you sit down to write about it, you're like, what was I thinking, you know? So anyway, we'll see if I'm able to share something that's of value today. So I always think every Sunday when we do the Bodhisattva vow at the end, I really pay attention to each of those lines. And our first line is, creations are numberless, I vow to free them. What are we freeing these creations from? Their suffering. You know, we're vowing to free creations from suffering. And how do we do this? How do we free others from suffering? Well, one way to think about this vow is that, right, it is a vow of compassion. The aspiration to relieve suffering, opening our hearts to the realities of the world, and acting from a place of warmth and wholeheartedness. And it's really important to keep in mind that each of us personally is included in that vow. You know, we are a creation too. And I love this quote from Sharon Salzberg. I actually have a little card at home, a greeting card that has this quote on the front of it. And it says, you, as much as anybody in the universe, deserve your love and affection. So we need to include ourselves in this vow of compassion. And why is compassion so important? Well, there's an element of Buddhism that I was reading about that says compassion is a refusal to accept any suffering as unrelated to us. It's compassion is a refusal to accept any suffering as unrelated to us. So if that's true, then compassion for another person is compassion for ourselves. You know, in the ultimate sense of, in the absolute sense, we're all one, we're all united. So the Buddha said, when watching after yourself, you watch after others. When watching after others, you watch after yourself. And the Dalai Lama said, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. So it's just there. No matter if we're doing it for ourselves or for other people, it has the same effect. We're being directed to seeing that compassion is a way to happiness. It's a way to peace. It's a way to a just world. So we fulfill this vow by cultivating our compassionate heart. And, you know, it's not so hard to have compassion for someone close to us who's experiencing a hardship, right? Like I don't have, if one of my friends has experienced a loss or is having a hard time or whatever, it's not so hard to practice compassion in that situation. And it's not even so hard to practice compassion for someone that's not near to us. We just need to look at the news. Ukraine, migrants, refugees, abused children, abused animals, the earth. It's pretty easy to conjure up that compassion. It kind of comes up. We're not always sure what we should do, what a compassionate act may be, but we can feel a sense of a soft heart, a warm heart, and wanting to do something to help. But maybe you've heard this saying or some version of it. Have compassion for everyone you meet, for you do not know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone. So everyone. So this isn't a quality or action that we dip into only when there's like an obvious hardship or tragedy or illness or loss. We're vowing to be compassionate to all in our interactions, to live from a compassionate heart. So can we have compassion for ourselves when we become irritated with our daily annoyances? Can we have compassion for ourselves when we get down or grumpy, when things don't go our way? Can we have compassion for suffering that is expressed toward us in anger? Because that's another way to see somebody else's irritation or anger, is their suffering. Can we have compassion towards that? Maybe it's a partner or a child or a boss. So suffering covers such an enormous ground, from global crises to social injustices to individual sorrows to just our day-to-day annoyances. Somebody being late, repeated habits of our own that cause us stress, fears of not being good enough. I actually want to focus on this day-to-day compassion today. Not because the other situations aren't compelling, but because I think the need for compassion in our day-to-day lives is something that maybe we don't think about quite as much. So if we're to be instruments of relieving suffering, Buddhism points us to two qualities that we must aspire to embody: wisdom and compassion. Wisdom always contains compassion, and compassion, wise compassion, always comes from a place of wisdom. And let's just spend just a moment talking about compassion. As I've said earlier, it's about caring, being concerned about another's suffering and having the desire to help. I also think that practices like kindness and appreciation are sort of related practices to compassion. Maybe they help us move in that direction of being compassionate. So when I talk about kindness or appreciation, I am absolutely not talking about people pleasing, right? That's not coming from an open heart. That's coming from still a place of wanting something to happen in the external world. And in Buddhism, that kind of people pleasing can sometimes be called idiot compassion. We're acting in a way that we think is compassionate, when in fact it's going to cause more suffering for us. And I'm also not talking about being kind outwardly while harboring resentment, or being kind outwardly and then going and talking with somebody else about that person. None of us ever do that, right? It's truly about softening our hearts, our rigidity, our ego clinging, so that we can be open to others in a warm way. And as I was thinking about that, I was like, wow, this is not for the faint of heart. It is not so easy to do on a day-to-day basis with every interaction that I have throughout the day. The role model for this is Avalokitesvara, the bodhisattva of compassion. This is one thing I read about her. She's a bodhisattva who hears the cries of the world and responds with a boundless heart. Boundless. That word alone threatens my ego. Right? My ego says almost immediately, well, what about me? And what about when they do this? Or what about when I run into that? So, how do we do this? How do we have a boundless heart? How do we bring compassion into our day-to-day actions and interactions? How do we enhance our capacity for compassion? So fortunately, one thing we've got going for us is evolution. It's not only humans, but apes, dogs, birds, elephants, animals, and no doubt many other animals have shown a tendency to help others in distress. And it's part of our evolutionary development. I remember seeing one video on social media. I'm afraid I watched some of those videos that pop up on my screen. And this one was, there was a herd of elephants, and there was this big, ground they had to get up to. And there was a little baby elephant that just couldn't get up there. Some people are shaking their heads, maybe you saw this. And two elephants came down and sort of boosted him from the back to get him over the top. So that was like an expression, whether or not they were conscious that this was a compassionate act. Maybe it was just instinctual, but nonetheless, it was helping another in distress. So it's not too surprising if you think about it, those species who protect and defend themselves will flourish. So it makes sense that this is part of our biological makeup. We are social animals designed to be at our happiest when we're helping and connecting. We're social animals. Another way that I think about it, or have heard it spoken about, is that we're relational animals. This is where our happiness comes from. Yes, it's also where a lot of our frustration and suffering comes from, but we need each other. And so finding ways to behave and be with each other with a warm and open heart is going to it's going to reduce our suffering and increase our happiness. And in Buddhism, at least for me, when we use the word happiness, we're not talking about that state where we're up here and gleeful and joyful and feeling kind of high. Happiness is sort of this consistent state where we feel content, satisfied. Life is good, grounded, whole. Those are the ways that happiness, I think of happiness in Buddhism. So we have this evolutionary piece going for us, which is good. And then I would say that Buddhism has so many systems for us to study and practice to help us open our hearts. There is the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, right? The Eightfold Path provides us with a system, a training to help us live life skillfully and with an open heart. There are the precepts that help guide our behavior. There's Lojong, the mind training. There's loving kindness meditation. There are the 6 perfections or the 6 paramitas. They're all of, and I'm just mentioning a few of them, right? There are so many, I don't know what to call them. I don't want to call them tools. They're Dharma to help us move forward to live with an open heart. All of these systems move us in the direction of softening our hearts, cultivating thoughts, speech, and behaviors that will be compassionate and that will emerge from an awakened heart. And it makes sense for us to familiarize ourselves more deeply with these tools or systems or trainings that are available for us to practice with them. So here at the Zen Center, during the recent Ango participants with Diane's Yogetsu's help, took a deep dive into Lojong and how that can help us begin to live from a more compassionate place. In the Foundations course, we teach loving kindness meditation. Students studying with either a Roshi Robert or Roshi June explore the precepts and then commit to living by the precepts in Jukai. Roshi Robert teaches a whole course that's grounded in the 6 perfections, the 6 paramitas. So there are all these opportunities for us right here at the Zen Center to sort of expose ourselves to this important work. And then, of course, we have our meditation. I'll just speak for myself here. For me, sitting cultivates and sustains calm abiding. And I think wise compassion comes from abiding. We get there through a disciplined practice of meditation, learning about ourselves, calming our mind, heart, and then it can soften, it can open. Sitting creates a grounding, the quieting, an ability to pause, a settling. And for me, it carries beyond my time sitting or on the cushion or whatever, right? It carries through with me into the day. So it's really important because for me, it creates what I think of as a platform, a steady platform, a quality of steadiness that allows me to observe myself, how I operate in times of calm and in times of anxiety or fear. And then that increases my capacity for cultivating behavior that can reduce suffering. Like I can catch myself before I say that sarcastic thing. I can notice and acknowledge when I'm tired or anxious or fearful and ask myself, what do I need? I can begin to feel more grounded in my skin, which allows my heart to open just a little bit more because I don't have to be so defended when I am more comfortable in my body and in my mind. And I also find that when I offer myself compassion and kindness for my foibles, for my errors, for my needs, my needs sometimes feel like a little neediness, that I find myself doing the same for others. When my heart opens up to me, it also softens a little bit for other people. Oh, just like me, he gets angry. Oh, just like I was the other day, she's a little grumpy today. I can sort of begin to resonate with the fact that what I see in others are things that I also experience. And that helps me to have a little bit more compassion. So meditation, I think, gives the strong, steady, sturdy foundation or platform, and then all of these dharmas, practices, give us the tools to handle the how, so that we can sort of work on reducing our defensiveness, our protectiveness, and opening our hearts more. At least that's how it works for me. So, I have a side note here. Here's something that's interesting to me that I have read before, that meditation in other, I don't know if it's the East, I think in not Western meditation, but more in the Asian meditation, the different realms or different schools. Meditation has been seen as an advanced practice in other forms of Buddhism. So, they start with some of the other practices first, and then move to meditation. So I don't think it really matters. I'm sure it's true you can start with whatever you want first, or you don't have to, if you don't have a solid sitting practice, start with some of the other things, I mean, it can go either direction. So I can't imagine any of us here this morning would describe themselves as someone who isn't compassionate. Right, we kind of think of ourselves, we kind of got this. If we're on this path, we know the importance of being open-hearted, of being kind and generous. We're doing our best to live the life of a bodhisattva. And yet, it's just not always easy. So I wanted to share just a couple of examples from my own experience of how this can pop up for me in my day-to-day life. Just like you, I like to think that I act compassionately. And, I think for a large part of the time I do. But as Suzuki Roshi has said, you are perfect as you are, and there's room for improvement. And that certainly describes me. Sometimes I mistake fixing things, offering solutions, jumping in with advice, telling someone how they should do something as compassion. At least I'm thinking it's helpful. I'm reducing their suffering because I know what you should do. Here's how to handle that. It can be helpful, but not always. Especially if we jumped in with our advice without being asked to provide it. If we didn't stop and pause first and kind of take a read of what is this person needing in order to reduce their suffering. Similarly, sometimes over-caring actually inhibits the person's experience. For example, maybe your child or grandchild didn't leave proper time to write a paper for school, and now you jump in at the end to help them get it written. This action might feel compassionate, but depending on the circumstances, it wouldn't necessarily fall into the category of wise compassion. So often it's much better to come alongside someone, deeply listen, be a presence, not advice give, or be someone who sort of takes over with having the right thing to do. So that's one thing that can happen to me. And I just want to give an example of a real life example that I sort of fits this. So in my professional life, before I retired, I worked in human resources for a good number of years. And I would often have people come to my office to complain about their boss or complain about their employee, the person they're supervising, or to complain about a coworker. And early on in my career in human resources, I would sit across from the person as they're telling their situation. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, I have no idea what this person should do. None, zero. I am clueless. What am I going to do? What am I supposed to do? Anxious. I'm supposed to have an answer. And over time, I learned, oh, no, I'm not. What this person needs is a safe space, a container, to hear themselves speak, to hear themselves explain their problem, have a few questions asked of them to clarify things by me. They go away, not always, but I will tell you, 85% of the time, they go away and they feel like they have just been unbelievably helped. And all I did was sit there and listen. I say all I did, but it's not so easy to sit there and listen when somebody's telling you they're suffering, because you want to jump in and help. You want to jump in and fix, but sometimes coming alongside is a really great way to be with someone. We don't have to offer a specific answer. So you might ask yourself, where in my life am I perhaps over-helping? Sometimes, often, I'm moving through life too speedily or distractedly, missing opportunities for really understanding what might be going on with someone else near to me. And I can't be compassionate or a loving presence if I'm just barreling through my life. And that is kind of a habit of mine. It's kind of a habit of mine. I think I kind of like the juice I get or something when I'm really busy. So another example, when I was working, I would be at work all day and, running on high octane. I would commute home, and my commute home was over an hour. And instead of using that as a time to decompress, I would use it as a time to review my day and think about what I didn't get done and what I should have gotten done and what I got to do tomorrow and how am I going to get it all done. So I'd get home and I am not relaxed. I am still on 10. My husband would usually get home about an hour before me, and he would make dinner. I'd get home to a table set, dinner ready. I would sit down, and I'm still on 10. I can't pay attention to him. In fact, what I can do is get kind of like irritated if there's something that's just not quite right, because I'm just, I'm not relaxed. I'm still barreling through my life. So if he's had a bad day, well, tough luck, because I am not going to see it. I am not going to have any room for it. So, again, a question to ask yourself, where in my life do I have an opportunity to maybe settle a little bit more? And that deep breath will allow us to just pay attention to the people around us, see what's happening with them. Does that resonate with any of you? Do you go through your life like that sometimes? And then finally, I just wanted to say, sometimes I can see that when I am anxious, and by anxious, I just mean activated. It might be because I'm really busy. It might just be, I'm just anxious. Or if I'm in distress, maybe I'm fearful, maybe something's happened in this interaction that I'm not comfortable with. So if I'm in distress in response to another person's suffering, I act out of a place that is more about relieving my own suffering than paying attention to what's going on in front of me. So we have to slow down and observe ourselves and begin to recognize that when we're anxious, fearful, what is it that we do to try to calm ourselves? I've learned that my actions to fix something increase when I'm anxious. So let me talk about a situation here. So I have an elderly mom. She's 87, still lives in her own apartment, and she's got some issues. I certainly provide some care for her. And she has health conditions that means that she is quite frequently in high levels of pain. And that means she doesn't sleep well. If she doesn't sleep well, then she's not cognitively great during the day. So there's, so if she's going through a spell where she's having a hard time and I'm out at her house, I don't like that she's suffering. Since the time I was a small child, reducing my mother's suffering, reducing my mom's anxiety, reducing my mom's whatever was a big piece of what I learned to do as a kid. So in order to reduce my suffering, I'll start trying to fix hers. Well, have you tried this? Have you done this? Let's move the table around, let's do whatever. And what I find is that when I can just let her sit at the sofa, let me sit at the chair, and let her just talk about it, that reduces her suffering more than me trying to change everything. I have to sit there with my own discomfort, right? I have to sit there with my own sense of, I wish I could do more. So we just have to watch ourselves. We have to become more observant of ourselves, of what do I do with my own discomfort? How do I sort of project that or try to fix something out there? So it's so important to begin to observe and acknowledge these unskillful means that we might have. Joan Halifax talks about deeply examining our response to suffering while letting go of self-judgment. So if we start judging ourselves for being inadequate or that we didn't do this right, or we simply increase suffering rather than alleviating it. Instead of berating yourself, you can learn to notice what you do in the face of suffering, whether it's your own suffering or someone else's. What do I do with that? Be curious and reflect on how your actions affect other people's hearts. What am I offering up in these situations? Am I able to stay open? And I think this is where meditation comes in, where mindfulness comes in, increasing our capacity for observing our own behavior on the cushion and in the world. And this is where our tools come in, familiarizing and re-familiarizing ourselves with all of these helpful practices that are available to us through loving kindness, through the precepts, through the 6 perfections. If you've taken classes already, take them again. I'm telling you, I teach mindfulness, the Foundations of Mindfulness class. I have for 8 years. And every single time I teach it, there's something that deepens for me. So it's Dharma that just doesn't get old. You can always pick something else up, or pick up a book, study on your own. We're doing our own work so that we can be more comfortable in our own skin. And when we're more comfortable in our own skin, we're less defended, we feel less need to protect, and we can be more open-hearted. We just know that through research that anxiety and fear constrict our awareness. We're aware of much less in our environment when we're anxious, when our awareness just narrows. So we're trying to get more comfortable in our own skin. So like so many of our other practices, opening our hearts is a lifelong practice. It requires loosening our grip on our ego and our certainty about life. Not knowing and bearing witness are certainly great practices as well. In our bones, we know that compassion, kindness, and appreciation are the way to live in the world. We know this. We know we feel better when compassion and an open and soft heart is how we engage with others. And it's an all-day, everyday practice. With everyone you encounter, yourself, your family members, your coworkers, the slow cashier at the grocery store, the guy in front of you who won't drive fast enough. Our intention is to bring an open and caring heart. So I hope you'll be inspired to dig into some of our wonderful practices that we have here at the center and in Buddhism generally, with appreciation for how it can strengthen your ability to live from a compassionate heart. So, thank you. Any comments or questions?
Hi, Chris.
Hey, Robert.
I used to struggle with this a lot, or I mean, sometimes I still do, coming out of a Catholic upbringing where you're taught, you're by nature bad.
Mm.
And when I first came to Zen particularly, I was like, well, how is just sitting there going to make me compassionate? Aren't we naturally selfish? Isn't that our survival instinct? And then when I came to this center, and there's a blend of the more Tibetan stuff where you're consciously trying to sort of cultivate compassion with things like Lojong you mentioned and loving kindness. I'm just interested, do you think that we're naturally compassionate? Or do you think it's something that's something that's going to arise naturally from our meditative practice? I mean, you hit on this a little bit, but I wanted you to talk a little more about it. Or is it something we have to consciously cultivate, or is it both? Or, what do you think?
I think it's all. I do think that we're naturally compassionate. I do. Am I right? I don't know. But that's sort of what I feel. I just feel that all of our conditioning and all of our fearfulness that we, over the years of our life, that we start covering that up because we're protecting some sense of self that we think won't exist or will be somehow threatened if we're not if we don't have these defensive behaviors. And I think so the more that we can sort of get closer to recognizing that there is no territory to protect, we can open up that heart and let that natural compassion shine through. But because we are humans and we live in this conditioned world, I think that we also have to cultivate it. I think we have to practice it. So it's a both and.
Thanks. Great talk, by the way.
Thank
Very
you.
compassionate.
I guess I would also just say that I agree with you. I don't think that just simply sitting is going to release that compassionate heart. For me, what sitting does for me is, as I said, it creates that platform that now I can observe myself without my own defensiveness coming up. I can say, oh, when I'm in this situation, I do this. I can see myself more clearly. And when I can see myself more clearly, that's when sort of the practices then come into place. But I need that meditation to get myself grounded and able to observe myself. Other comments? If not.
Great talk, Chris.
Oh, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. Great. Well, for those of you who are here.
I just want to say thank you. You remind me of why I am so glad I found Buddhism. Your talks are always great, and it's so refreshing and to the point and grounding. Thank you. I remember an instance. I was driving along a road in a forest preserve, and it was a very busy road. And I looked to the side and I saw this large box on the side of the road, a big box, and it was partly open. And I said, oh my God, someone was sleeping there. And I was just very moved. Oh. I didn't know what to do. I was angry, but the thing is that I had probably driven by that box maybe 30, 50 times over the years or something like it, because it was obviously someone living in the forest preserve. It wasn't there at the moment, and I'd never seen it. it was there, but I never saw it. So I think for me, I had begun meditating maybe 6 months before that. For me, what I see is that meditation kind of removes the mud that's on the Buddha.
Mm.
So, and the Buddha finally showed up, or some of it, and I was able to see what I had never seen before and have compassion for it. So, thank you for your talk.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Chris, for your inspiration. And I think your own open heart is always available to people. And I felt it very deeply today in your talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Chris. I felt so happy as you were speaking. I could feel the compassion and enjoyed and profited from your talk. I am also someone who barrels through and gets some juice from speed or velocity, I don't know, moving too fast and rushing through things. And I just want to say that you talked about some of the benefits of meditation, but for me, slowing down, helping me to be able to adjust, that is one of the finest things that meditation gives me.
Yeah, so true. I think for me too. I mean, it definitely, meditation has, I don't know, I think maybe it helps again. For me, it helps me to see myself and see that I'm not at my best when I'm barreling through life like that. But you're right. I think just the calming, the settling it provides is really, really a huge benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. It was beautiful, just beautiful. And I love your focusing, having us focus on the day-to-day experiences. That of course there are the more grandiose displays of compassion, or the places that we sort of, can sit and reflect and go to. But I love your encouragement about, the day-to-day ways that we build patience and kindness and awareness and generosity that are leading us deeper and deeper into, compassionate practices, sort of the organic compassion that can arise. So thank you for that encouragement.
Thank you.
Beautiful talk.
Thanks. Well, if you're here in Chicago, try to enjoy the beautiful snow. I said when I came in this morning, if we're going to have these gloomy days that we've been having, at least the snow provides a little brightness. It was really beautiful this morning. I hope you all have a great day, and see you again soon. Thank you.